Picture an eye the size of a dinner plate staring back at you from total darkness. It belongs to an animal that outweighs a grown man 10 times over, and almost no scientist has ever seen it alive. The colossal squid is the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, and for 100 years, it was known only from scraps pulled out of a whale's stomach. We are diving thousands of feet down, into water so cold and dark it crushes submarines. Down there waits a creature with hooks that rotate like tiny claws, blood that runs blue, and a body built from jelly strong enough to fight a sperm whale and walk away. We will watch it vanish, then flush red in a heartbeat. We will find out why its eyes grew bigger than any eye in the animal kingdom, and what they're really watching for. If this kind of deep sea mystery grips you, hit subscribe, because we are about to go somewhere almost nobody has gone before. Take a breath. The deep is waiting. The robot sinks slowly, lights cutting a thin path through the black. Above it, 1.5 miles of ocean presses down, heavy enough to flatten steel. The crew watches a screen on the surface, half expecting nothing but mud and empty water. Then something drips into frame. It looks like glass. A body, thin and see-through, hangs in the water like it has no weight at all. Its arms curl loosely, almost lazy, and for a second nobody on the ship says a word. Then someone whispers the words that will end up in headlines around the world. That might be a colossal squid. Nobody planned this moment. The robot, a submersible called Sebastian, was not hunting for this animal, it was simply exploring, cameras rolling, when a shape swam directly into its path near a cluster of frozen islands at the edge of Antarctica. The squid did not flee. It barely reacted at all. Drifting past the lights like the machine was just another current. For scientists watching the video feed from thousands of miles away, this was the moment they had waited their whole careers for. Some had studied this animal for 20 years without ever laying eyes on a living one. Everything they knew came from dead bodies, torn apart, pulled from places the squid never chose to be. This was different. This was the animal on its own terms, in its own home, doing nothing more dramatic than existing. The squid drifting in that footage was young, small enough to fit in a shoebox. Its body was almost fully transparent, organs faintly visible through skin like frosted glass. That transparency is not an accident. In a world with no sunlight, being invisible is one of the best defenses an animal can have. Predators hunting by sight see nothing but water, even when something is floating right in front of them. But this small, glassy juvenile was only a preview. Somewhere in that same freezing ocean, adults exist that could grow heavier than a grand piano, wrapped in muscle instead of glass, but with weapons on their arms that could tear a predator apart. Nobody has ever filmed one. Nobody alive has watched an adult colossal squid swim through open water and go about its business, unaware that anyone was looking. The footage of the juvenile spread everywhere within days. News anchors called it a sea monster. Scientists were far more careful. They called it something else entirely, a beginning. For the first time in a century of study, humans had a living image to match the legend. That legend started with almost nothing. A few torn arms found inside the stomach of a dead whale, back when submarines barely existed and nobody had any real way to reach the deep sea. From those scraps, an entire species had to be imagined, pieced together like a puzzle missing most of its pieces. This creature spent 100 years as mostly guesswork, stitched from fragments and fear. Now a live animal had finally shown itself, and what it revealed only deepened the mystery. Every camera, every research trip, every torn tentacle recovered from a predator's belly had led to one conclusion. Nothing about this animal follows the normal rules. Its body breaks expectations built from every other creature in the ocean. Its eyes are too big. Its blood runs the wrong color. Its body is built from something closer to jelly than muscle, yet strong enough to fight and sometimes beat one of the largest predators alive. Even its hooks work in ways no other squids do, twisting and rotating like tools built for a machine, not an animal. This is a creature built for extremes, shaped by one of the most brutal, lightless environments on the planet. Every strange feature exists for a reason, even when that reason took scientists decades to figure out. The glass-bodied juvenile drifting through that camera's light was only the surface. Somewhere beneath it, deeper and older and far bigger, waits the animal true researchers still barely understand. To reach it, we have to start at the beginning, with the basic question nobody could answer for 100 years. How big does this thing actually get, and why does its size break every rule invertebrates are supposed to follow? Somewhere off the coast of Antarctica, in water so cold it would stop a human heart in minutes, swims an animal heavier than most cars. It has no bones, no skeleton at all, just muscle, jelly, and 8 arms curled around a body built to survive crushing pressure. Scientists call it Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni. Almost everyone else just calls it the colossal squid. Weight is where this animal earns its name. Fully grown, it can top 1100 pounds. That is heavier than a grand piano, heavier than a small car, heavier than nearly every other invertebrate that has ever been weighed. No insect, no crab, no octopus, no jellyfish comes close. In terms of sheer mass, this squid stands alone at the top of an entire branch of life on Earth. Length tells a different story. The colossal squid is not the longest sea creature. Its famous cousin, the giant squid, can stretch out longer thanks to 2 extremely long, thin feeding tentacles. But length is deceiving. Stretch a rope across a football field and it still weighs almost nothing. The giant squid is long and light. The colossal squid is shorter and packed with muscle, like the difference between a marathon runner and a heavyweight boxer, built for raw power instead of reach. That power comes from where this animal lives. Its home is the Southern Ocean, the ring of freezing water that circles Antarctica. Temperatures there hover near freezing year-round, and the squid spends most of its life far below the sunlight, in a zone so dark that eyes barely matter for most animals that live there. For the colossal squid, that darkness is not a small detail. It is the reason almost every part of its body looks the way it does. Depth is the second piece of the puzzle. Young colossal squid start out relatively shallow, drifting a few hundred feet down where faint light still reaches. As they grow, they sink deeper, eventually settling in zones that can reach over a mile below the surface. Down there, sunlight does not exist at all. Pressure alone would crush a human body instantly. Submarines built to survive that depth cost hundreds of millions of dollars and still get tested carefully before every dive. The colossal squid does not need a submarine. Its body is built from the inside out to survive that pressure without armor, without a shell, without anything resembling a skeleton. That alone makes it one of the strangest survival stories in the ocean, an animal that thrives in a place that would instantly destroy almost anything else. Yet for all its size, this squid remained almost a myth for most of scientific history. Researchers spent decades studying pieces, a beak here, a tentacle there, fragments pulled from the stomachs of whales that had actually managed to catch and eat one. A living adult, swimming freely in its own habitat, has never once been filmed. Not one time, in the entire history of ocean exploration. Compare that to almost any other large animal on Earth. Elephants, whales, even deep-sea creatures like anglerfish have all been filmed extensively, studied up close, tracked and measured across their lives. The colossal squid remains the exception, an animal heavier than a piano, sharing our planet right now, and no human has ever watched a full-grown one swim free in open water. Part of that mystery comes from where it lives. The Southern Ocean is remote, brutal, and expensive to explore. Few ships travel there. Fewer submersibles are built tough enough to survive both the cold and the pressure at the depths where adults are believed to live. Every research trip into that region takes massive planning, and even then, spotting one specific animal in an ocean that large is closer to luck than skill, so scientists have had to build their picture of this creature the hard way, from clues instead of direct observation, torn arms, digested beaks, scars left behind on the skin of animals that fought and survived an encounter. Each piece adds a little more to a portrait that is still, even now, mostly guesswork stitched together across 100 years of research. What that guesswork has revealed so far is stranger than almost any myth sailors ever told about sea monsters. This is an animal with eyes larger than any other creature alive, a body chemistry unlike almost anything else in the ocean, and weapons on its arms unlike any other squid species on the planet. Every one of those features connects back to the same brutal environment: total darkness, freezing cold, and crushing pressure, a mile or more below anything resembling daylight. To understand why this squid looks the way it does, the story has to start with its eyes. Because those eyes are not just big, they may be the largest eyes that have ever existed on any animal, living or extinct, and the reason behind that size is more unsettling than anyone expected. Hold up a dinner plate. Now imagine that plate is an eyeball, sitting inside the head of a living animal. That is not an exaggeration. The colossal squid has been recorded with eyes reaching close to 11 inches across, roughly the size of a soccer ball. No other known animal, living or extinct, has eyes that large relative to anything scientists have measured. For comparison, a human eye measures about 1 inch across. A great white shark's eye is roughly the size of a golf ball. Even a blue whale, the largest animal to ever exist on Earth, has eyes barely bigger than a human's. The colossal squid's eyes dwarf all of them, despite the fact that its body, while massive, is nowhere close to whale-sized. Inside an eye that large sits a lens roughly the size of an orange. That lens is the part of the eye that focuses light, and a bigger lens generally means the ability to gather more light in dark conditions. Photographers understand this instinctively. A camera lens the size of a coin captures far less light than one the size of a dinner plate. The colossal squid's eyes work on the same basic principle, built to pull in every scrap of available light in a place where light barely exists at all. That environment is the deep Southern Ocean, sometimes over a mile beneath the surface. At that depth, sunlight has been completely filtered out by the water above. No blue glow, no faint shimmer, nothing. The only light that exists down there comes from bioluminescence, the natural glow produced by certain fish, jellyfish, and other deep sea creatures when they move or get disturbed. Most animals living in that kind of darkness eventually lose their eyesight altogether. Evolution tends to shrink or eliminate features that cost energy without providing a clear benefit, and eyes are expensive to build and maintain. Many deep sea fish species have tiny eyes, or none at all, relying instead on other senses to survive in the dark. The colossal squid took the opposite path. Instead of shrinking its eyes, it grew them to a size unmatched anywhere else in the animal kingdom. That kind of investment does not happen by accident. An organ this costly to build and maintain had to be solving an extremely important problem, one significant enough to be worth the trade-off. Scientists spent years debating exactly what that problem was. Some early guesses focused on hunting, the idea that bigger eyes helped the squid spot prey more effectively in the dark. That explanation made some sense on the surface, but it did not fully add up. Plenty of deep-sea predators hunt successfully with far smaller eyes, using other senses like touch, vibration, or smell instead of relying purely on sight. The real answer turned out to be far more unsettling. A team of researchers eventually proposed that these massive eyes did not evolve mainly for hunting prey at all. They evolved for something closer to survival, something built specifically to detect one particular threat, approaching from a distance in complete darkness. That threat swims through the same freezing water the colossal squid calls home, and it is large enough, powerful enough, and hungry enough to make eyesight worth every ounce of energy the squid spends building it. Understanding that threat means understanding exactly what those massive eyes are built to see coming, long before it gets close enough to strike. Bigger eyes cost more than most people realize. Growing and maintaining a large, complex organ takes energy, and in the deep sea, energy is one of the rarest resources of all. Food is scarce down there. Every calorie an animal spends has to be worth it, or evolution eventually trims it away. That is exactly what happened to most deep sea creatures. Over millions of years, many species shrank their eyes down to almost nothing, or lost them completely, because eyesight stopped being worth the cost in a place with no light to see by. Blind cave fish follow the same pattern on land, in caves instead of oceans. When light disappears, eyes usually follow. The colossal squid broke that pattern entirely. Instead of shrinking its eyes, it grew them bigger than any other animal on the planet. That kind of investment only makes sense if the payoff is enormous, something valuable enough to justify spending huge amounts of energy on a single organ. For years, most scientists assumed hunting was the answer. Bigger eyes, they reasoned, should mean better hunting in the dark, spotting prey other predators might miss. It seemed logical enough on the surface, but when researchers ran the numbers, that explanation started falling apart. Eyes this large only offer a meaningful hunting advantage over smaller eyes when an animal is trying to spot something from very far away, much farther than the distance most prey hunting actually requires. Catching a fish or another squid usually happens at close range, where even a modestly sized eye works just fine. The colossal squid's eyes were oversized for that job by a wide margin, so a team of scientists asked a different question. What if these eyes were not built to find food at all? What if they were built to spot something coming from far away, something big enough and dangerous enough that spotting it early could mean the difference between life and death? That question led to a discovery that reframed everything researchers thought they knew about this animal. The Southern Ocean is home to one of the largest and most powerful predators on the planet, an animal capable of diving thousands of feet deep in search of prey, hunting almost entirely by sound and by sensing movement in total darkness. When predators like that swim, they disturb the water around them. In the deep sea, that disturbance often triggers a burst of bioluminescent light, tiny organisms flashing or glowing when jostled by movement nearby. A massive body pushing through the dark can trigger a faint shimmer of light across a wide area, almost like a silent alarm going off in the water. Detecting that shimmer from a distance requires an eye built specifically to catch faint, spread out light rather than sharp, close-up detail. A huge eye with a huge lens does exactly that. It trades fine detail for raw sensitivity, the ability to notice the faintest possible glow from far enough away to actually do something about it. That theory reframed the entire story of the colossal squid's eyes. They were not built primarily to help it hunt. They were built to help it survive, tuned to detect one specific kind of danger, approaching through water with no light at all. And that danger has a name, a shape, and a very long history of hunting animals exactly like this one. The colossal squid did not evolve its massive eyes in isolation. It evolved them because of a predator that has been diving into its world for millions of years, one capable of finding it in total darkness using nothing but sound and touch. Picture something the size of a school bus, moving through pitch black water with no light at all, hunting purely by sound. That is not science fiction. That is a sperm whale, diving thousands of feet down into the same freezing ocean the colossal squid calls home, searching for exactly this kind of prey. Sperm whales are the deepest diving predators on the planet, capable of descending well over a mile below the surface in search of food. Down there they cannot see in any traditional sense. The light does not reach that depth. Instead, they hunt using echolocation, sending out clicks of sound and listening for what bounces back, painting a picture of their surroundings using sound instead of sight. For the colossal squid, that means its predator can find it without ever needing to see it. No amount of camouflage, no amount of transparency can hide a body from sound waves bouncing through water. That single fact changes the entire survival equation for this animal. Hiding is not enough. It needs another way to detect danger before danger detects it first. That is where the eyes come back into the story. While sperm whales hunt by sound, their massive bodies moving through the water still disturb everything around them, including the tiny light-producing organisms that drift through the deep sea by the billions. When a whale swims, it can trigger faint bursts of bioluminescent light across a wide stretch of water, a glow visible only to something with an eye big enough and sensitive enough to catch it. That is exactly what the colossal squid's eyes are built to do. Instead of trying to outhear or outswim a predator many times its size, the squid may rely on catching that faint shimmer of disturbed light from a distance, giving it precious seconds to react before the whale gets close enough to strike. Seconds matter enormously in a fight this one-sided. A sperm whale can grow to nearly 60 feet long and weigh over 40 tons, dwarfing even the largest colossal squid ever recorded. In a direct confrontation at close range, the outcome rarely favors the squid. Its best chance at survival often comes down to detecting the threat early enough to escape before that confrontation ever begins. This relationship did not develop overnight. Sperm whales and colossal squid have likely been locked in this same underwater standoff for millions of years, an evolutionary arms race playing out entirely in darkness, far from any human witness. The whale evolved incredible hunting senses built for total darkness. The squid, in response, evolved the largest eyes on the planet, built specifically to detect that hunter before it gets close. Evidence of this ancient rivalry exists in a place most people would never think to look: the skin of sperm whales themselves. Scientists studying whale carcasses and hunting records have found something remarkable: scars covering the skin of many adult sperm whales, circular marks that tell a very specific story about exactly what these two animals do when they finally meet in the dark. Those scars were assumed for decades to come from one particular deep-sea predator. Recent research has pointed toward a different, more surprising source, one directly tied to the same rotating hooks that make the colossal squid's arms so unlike any other squid species on Earth. Before those hooks can be explained though, the full scale of this predator-prey relationship needs a closer look, because these are not two animals passing quietly in the dark. This is one of the most intense, high-stakes struggles happening anywhere in the ocean. No human has ever watched a sperm whale hunt a colossal squid. Not once, not on camera, not through any submarine window. Everything scientists know about this battle comes from evidence left behind afterward, pieced together like a crime scene investigators arrive at long after the fight is over. That evidence starts inside the whale itself. When researchers examine the stomach contents of sperm whales caught during past whaling operations or occasionally found dead on beaches, they regularly discover something startling: colossal squid beaks. Hard, sharp, and nearly indigestible, these beaks survive inside a whale's stomach long after the rest of the squid's body has been broken down completely. In some cases, researchers have pulled hundreds of beaks from a single whale's stomach, evidence of a hunting relationship that repeats again and again across a whale's lifetime. For sperm whales living in the Southern Ocean, colossal squid may represent one of the largest and most important food sources available, a staple meal rather than an occasional catch. But this is not a one-sided slaughter. The colossal squid does not go quietly. Sperm whale skin, especially around the head and jaw, frequently shows circular scars, evidence of a struggle that happened at extremely close range before the whale finally won. These are not small scratches. Some scars measure several inches across, clustered in patterns that suggest a genuine fight rather than an easy meal. For decades, scientists assumed most of these scars came from a different giant of the deep, the more famous giant squid. That assumption made sense at the time, since giant squid were better studied and more widely known. Recent research has started to challenge that idea, pointing toward the colossal squid as the more likely source of many of these markings, based on the type of hook damage found in the scars themselves. That distinction matters because the colossal squid's weapons work differently than almost any other squid species on Earth. Its arms and tentacles carry hooks, not just the toothed suckers many people picture when they imagine a giant squid attack. Those hooks leave a very specific kind of wound, one that matches the scarring pattern found on many sperm whales far more closely than a giant squid's anatomy would predict. Piecing this story together took years of careful comparison between hook shapes, scar patterns, and stomach contents pulled from whales across multiple research expeditions. Scientists essentially had to work backward, using injuries and leftovers to reconstruct a battle nobody has ever directly observed. It is somewhat like solving a mystery using only fingerprints and broken furniture, never once seeing the actual event that caused the damage. What emerges from that evidence is a genuine underwater war, playing out across the entire Southern Ocean in complete darkness over and over, for as long as both species have shared these waters. Sperm whales dive down, searching for prey substantial enough to be worth the effort of a mile-deep hunt. Colossal squid, meanwhile, rely on massive eyes and a body built for combat to avoid becoming that meal. Most of these encounters likely end the same way, with the whale walking away victorious and the squid becoming another beak added to its stomach collection. But the scars tell a different part of the story too, proof that plenty of these fights are not easy. The squid does not simply get swallowed without resistance. It fights back, hooks digging in, doing whatever damage it can before the outcome is decided. That kind of resistance requires more than just the right eyes to spot danger coming. It requires a body strong enough to actually put up a fight against something many times its size and weight. Understanding how a boneless, jelly-like animal manages that kind of strength means looking past the eyes entirely, and examining what the rest of the colossal squid's body is actually made of, because the answer breaks nearly every assumption people have about how a powerful predator is supposed to be built. Squeeze a jellyfish and it offers almost no resistance at all. Now imagine an animal built from that same soft, water-heavy material, except this one is strong enough to fight a sperm whale and leave lasting scars behind. That contradiction sits at the center of the colossal squid's entire body plan. Unlike fish, whales, or nearly any large predator most people picture, the colossal squid has no internal skeleton whatsoever. No spine, no ribs, no bones of any kind. Its entire body is built from soft tissue, much of it closer in texture to gelatin than to the dense muscle found in something like a shark or a seal. That soft body design might sound like a weakness, and in many ways, it would be almost anywhere else on Earth, but in the deep ocean, it becomes a surprising advantage. Water pressure at these depths is immense, capable of crushing rigid, air-filled structures instantly. A soft, flexible, mostly water-based body handles that pressure far better than a stiff skeleton ever could, because there is nothing rigid inside to compress or shatter. Human submarines built to survive those depths require thick steel hulls, specifically engineered to resist collapsing under pressure. The colossal squid solves the same problem with a completely different strategy. Instead of resisting the pressure with strength, its body simply allows the pressure to pass through, since it is made mostly of water and soft tissue that behaves almost like the surrounding ocean itself. That does not mean the squid is weak though. Certain parts of its body, particularly the arms, tentacles, and the powerful muscles surrounding its central body, called the mantle, are dense with muscle fiber built for serious force. This is where the real strength lives, concentrated in specific areas rather than spread evenly throughout a jelly-like frame. The mantle works almost like a natural pump. By contracting powerfully, it forces water out through a narrow opening, propelling the squid forward in short, fast bursts. This is the same basic system every squid species uses to swim, but in an animal this size, that muscular contraction generates serious force, enough to move a body weighing hundreds of pounds through open water. The arms and tentacles tell a similar story. While the outer skin may look soft and almost translucent, especially in younger squid, the muscle underneath is dense and powerful, built specifically for gripping, pulling, and holding onto prey that does not want to be caught. This is the same muscle system responsible for the scars left behind on sperm whale skin. proof that soft does not mean harmless. This combination, a soft pressure-resistant body wrapped around pockets of dense, powerful muscle, allows the colossal squid to survive in an environment that would destroy almost any land animal instantly, while still remaining strong enough to fight for its life when a predator finally catches up to it. But surviving crushing pressure solves only part of the problem facing an animal that lives over a mile beneath the surface. The other challenge is staying in place at all. Without bones, without a swim bladder like a fish, and without the constant effort of swimming non-stop, how does an animal this heavy avoid simply sinking straight to the ocean floor? The answer involves a chemical trick almost unique to this squid's family, one that solves the buoyancy problem in a way most other ocean animals never needed to evolve. It also happens to be the same reason why, despite its massive size, nobody has ever seriously considered eating colossal squid meat. Swimming non-stop for an entire lifetime would burn an enormous amount of energy, and in the deep sea, where food is scarce and hard to find, wasted energy can mean the difference between survival and starvation. The colossal squid solves this problem in a way few other animals on Earth ever needed to. Most fish stay at a stable depth using something called a swim bladder, a gas-filled organ that can expand or shrink to control buoyancy. Squid do not have that option. Instead, the colossal squid and its close relatives rely on chemistry, filling their bodies with a substance that makes them naturally lighter than the surrounding seawater. That substance is ammonium, a compound less dense than regular seawater. Throughout its body, especially in specialized tissue running through its mantle and arms, the colossal squid stores ammonium-rich fluid instead of relying purely on muscle and movement to stay afloat. This built-in buoyancy allows the animal to hover in place, drifting through the deep sea without constantly burning energy just to avoid sinking. Picture a diver wearing a specially weighted vest, calibrated so perfectly that they neither sink nor float, hanging motionless in open water without kicking at all. That is essentially what ammonium storage does for the colossal squid, except this system is built directly into its cells rather than strapped on from the outside. This adaptation belongs to an entire family of deep-sea squid known as glass squids, named for the transparent, jelly-like bodies many species in this group share, especially while young. The colossal squid is by far the largest member of that family, but it inherited the same basic chemistry that allows its smaller relatives to drift effortlessly through deep water. There's a trade-off to this strategy though, and it shows up in a very specific way. Ammonium has a strong, sharp smell and an unpleasant, bitter taste, similar to the smell of household cleaning products. An animal whose tissue is saturated with it does not exactly make for an appetizing meal, at least not to human taste buds. This is part of the reason colossal squid has never appeared on any menu anywhere, despite its enormous size. Unlike other large sea creatures that get harvested for food, this particular giant remains almost entirely off limits for consumption, its own body chemistry acting as a natural deterrent against exactly the kind of large-scale hunting that has threatened other massive ocean animals throughout history. Sperm whales, interestingly, do not seem bothered by this taste the way humans would be. Their hunting strategy relies on echolocation and raw predatory instinct rather than peaky eating habits, and colossal squid remains one of their primary food sources in the Southern Ocean, regardless of how the meat might taste. For the squid itself, this ammonium-based buoyancy solves one enormous problem, letting it survive in an energy-scarce environment without wasting constant effort just to stay in place. But floating safely is only useful if the rest of the body can actually catch food when the opportunity arises, and that is where the colossal squid's most infamous weapons come into play. Tools completely unlike anything found on its more famous cousin, the giant squid. Ammonium does more than just keep the colossal squid floating. It fundamentally changes the relationship between this animal and every creature capable of hunting it, including humans, in ways that stretch far beyond simple taste. For most large sea animals, size alone makes them a target for human harvest. Whales were hunted for oil and meat. Giant tuna are pursued across entire oceans for a single catch. Even massive sharks have ended up as food in various cultures throughout history. Size on its own rarely protects an animal from human appetite. The colossal squid breaks that pattern almost entirely, and its ammonium-rich body is the primary reason why. The same chemical that keeps the squid weightless in deep water saturates its flesh with a bitter, chemical taste that makes it deeply unappealing as food. Fishermen who have accidentally caught colossal squid over the years describe the smell alone as overwhelming, closer to ammonia cleaning solution than anything resembling seafood. This built-in defense means the colossal squid has largely avoided the kind of large-scale commercial hunting that has devastated other massive ocean species. There's no fishing industry built around catching this animal, no market demand driving boats out to sea specifically to harvest it. Most colossal squid captured throughout history were accidents, caught unintentionally while fishing vessels targeted a completely different species entirely. That other species is the Antarctic toothfish, a large, deep-dwelling fish that both colossal squid and longline fishing boats hunt in the same frigid waters. When fishing lines set for toothfish accidentally snag a colossal squid instead, researchers finally get a rare chance to study a specimen up close, even though the animal usually arrives already dead or dying by the time it reaches the surface. This unusual situation means nearly everything scientists know about adult colossal squid anatomy comes from these accidental catches, rather than any deliberate research expedition. Every measurement of size, weight, and body structure taken from a full adult specimen exists because a fishing boat happened to snag one while searching for something else entirely. That reliance on accidental discovery has shaped the entire history of colossal squid research. Without a dedicated hunting industry pursuing this animal, and without commercial demand pushing exploration into its deep water habitat, scientific knowledge has crept forward slowly, one lucky catch at a time, across nearly a full century. The ammonium that protects the squid from becoming a meal does nothing to protect it from its actual predators, though. Sperm whales continue hunting it relentlessly, seemingly unbothered by the same chemical taste that keeps humans away. For the squid, survival still comes down to detection, speed, and, when all else fails, its weapons. Those weapons are where the colossal squid diverges most dramatically from every other squid species on the planet, including its famous long-bodied cousin. While most people picture squid and octopus arms lined with round-toothed suckers, the colossal squid's tentacles carry something else entirely, a feature so unusual that it remained one of the most talked about mysteries in all of deep-sea biology for decades. Every squid on Earth follows a basic body plan: 8 arms surrounding a central mouth, plus 2 longer feeding tentacles used specifically for grabbing prey. The colossal squid follows that same basic layout, at first glance looking similar to hundreds of other squid species found throughout the world's oceans. Look closer though, and the differences start showing up fast. The 8 shorter arms are lined with suckers, round, muscular cups that grip onto surfaces using suction, much like what most people picture when they imagine any squid or octopus. These suckers work well for holding onto prey once it has already been caught, providing a strong, flexible grip along the length of each arm. But those 2 longer feeding tentacles, the ones squid use to strike out and grab prey from a distance, tell a completely different story. Instead of ending in more suckers, the club tips of the colossal squid's tentacles are lined with something else entirely: hooks. Not soft, flexible hooks either. These are sharp, rigid, curved structures made from tough material, similar in toughness to fingernail or horn. Scientists sometimes compare them to tiny grappling hooks, purpose-built tools for snagging and holding on to struggling prey in an environment where a single missed strike could mean going hungry for a long time. This feature alone sets the colossal squid apart from nearly every other squid species most people have ever heard of, including its famous relative, the giant squid. Giant squid tentacles are lined with toothed suckers, cup-shaped structures ringed with small serrated teeth. They grip firmly, but they still rely fundamentally on suction to hold their prey in place. The colossal squid abandoned that suction-based system entirely on its tentacles, replacing it with hooks that do not rely on suction at all. Once a hook sinks into prey, it holds through sheer mechanical grip, piercing and anchoring rather than clamping down through suction pressure. In an environment where losing a meal could mean days without food, that kind of secure, guaranteed grip offers a serious survival advantage. Even more unusual, many of these hooks are not fixed in place. They can rotate, swiveling independently within their own sockets, almost like a joint built specifically for that single hook. This rotating movement allows the colossal squid to twist and tear at prey using the same hook, adjusting angle and pressure without needing to release its grip and strike again. Researchers who first studied preserved specimens found this feature almost unbelievable. Unlike anything documented in any other squid species examined up to that point, it represented an entirely different evolutionary solution to the same basic problem every predator faces: how to catch and hold onto prey that is actively trying to escape. That rotating design becomes especially important when considering the size and strength of what this squid sometimes has to fight. Prey capable of putting up a serious struggle, including fish nearly its own size, requires more than a simple grip to subdue successfully. A hook that can twist and adjust mid-fight offers a significant advantage over a fixed hook that can only pull in one direction. These rotating hooks did not simply appear as an isolated feature, though. They connect directly to a second, even more unsettling weapon found on this squid's arms, one that turns an already formidable hunting tool into something built almost specifically for tearing rather than just holding on. A fixed hook can only pull in one direction. Once it sinks into prey, the angle of the strike determines the angle of the hold, and there is little room to adjust without releasing the grip entirely and striking again. For most predators, that limitation is simply part of how hunting works. The colossal squid's tentacle hooks do not share that limitation. Each hook sits inside its own small socket, connected in a way that allows it to rotate independently from the surrounding tissue. Instead of being locked into a single angle, the hook can twist, shifting direction even after it has already pierced into prey. Imagine a fishing hook that could rotate on command after it was already set. Instead of simply holding a fish in place, it could twist and turn inside the wound, widening the damage and making escape far more difficult. That comparison, unsettling as it is, gets close to what these rotating hooks actually accomplish for the colossal squid during a hunt. This design likely serves two purposes at once. First, it allows the squid to reposition its grip on struggling prey without fully releasing it, adjusting to counter movement and resistance in real time. Second, and more dramatically, the rotation itself can cause additional tearing damage, widening wounds, and making it significantly harder for prey to twist free and escape. Researchers examining preserved specimens under close inspection found that the swiveling range on some of these hooks is substantial, capable of rotating a significant portion of a full turn. That range of motion is unusual enough on its own, but it becomes especially significant when paired with the sheer physical strength located in the tentacles and arms surrounding each hook. Combine a rotating hook with a powerful muscular arm capable of pulling with tremendous force, and the resulting weapon becomes something closer to a mechanical grappling tool than a simple biological grip. This is likely one of the primary reasons the colossal squid can occasionally win, or at least survive, an encounter with a predator as massive and powerful as a sperm whale. Evidence for this exists beyond just the anatomy itself. Remember those circular scars found scattered across sperm whale skin, the ones long assumed to come from a different giant squid species entirely. When researchers compared the shape and pattern of those scars more closely against the specific structure of colossal squid hooks, the match lined up far more precisely than anyone initially expected. Toothed suckers, the kind found on giant squid tentacles, tend to leave a specific type of circular scarring, consistent rings caused by the same repeated suction pattern. Rotating hooks leave something different: irregular, torn-looking scars, consistent with a weapon that twists and drags, rather than simply gripping and releasing in one clean motion. This distinction matters enormously for understanding exactly what happens when these two massive animals collide in the deep. It suggests that many of the battle scars long attributed to the giant squid may actually belong to its heavier, more aggressive cousin instead, a detail that quietly rewrote part of the established history surrounding sperm whale hunting behavior. But hooks alone only tell part of the story. Sitting alongside these swiveling, grappling tools is a second weapon, one built for outright shredding rather than gripping. These are the three-pointed hooks, a rarer and even more brutal design found in specific locations across the squid's tentacles, built for a very particular kind of damage. Most of the colossal squid's tentacle hooks follow a relatively simple curved design, similar in basic shape to a fishing hook, just built from tougher material and capable of rotating within its socket. But scattered among these standard hooks sit a smaller number of far more unusual weapons, hooks with not one point, but three. These three-pointed hooks represent one of the most distinctive and least understood features of the colossal squid's entire body. Instead of a single curved point designed to snag and hold, these structures branch into multiple sharp points radiating outward, creating a shape closer to a small grappling claw than a traditional hook. Scientists who have examined preserved specimens describe these three-pointed hooks as particularly effective at causing tearing damage, rather than simply providing a stable grip. Where a standard rotating hook might pierce and hold, a three-pointed hook increases the surface area of damage significantly, catching and shredding tissue across multiple points simultaneously rather than just one. The exact placement and function of these specialized hooks is still not completely understood, since researchers have had extremely limited access to well-preserved specimens showing this feature in detail. Most of what scientists know comes from the small handful of intact adult colossal squid ever recovered, each one adding a small piece to an incomplete picture. What does seem clear is that these three-pointed hooks likely serve a more aggressive purpose than the standard rotating hooks found elsewhere on the tentacles. While the simpler hooks may focus primarily on securing prey during the initial strike, these more complex structures may come into play specifically during a prolonged struggle, when prey is actively fighting back and simply holding on is no longer enough. That distinction becomes especially important when considering the kind of prey a colossal squid actually needs to subdue. Large, powerful fish capable of serious resistance require more than a passive grip to overcome. A weapon built specifically to increase damage during an active struggle offers a significant advantage in exactly that kind of fight. This combination of weapons, rotating standard hooks working alongside rarer three-pointed hooks, paints a picture of an animal built for close-range combat far more aggressively than its more famous cousin, the giant squid. Where the giant squid relies primarily on grip and suction to secure its meals, the colossal squid appears built specifically to inflict damage during the struggle itself, not just to hold on until the fight is over. That level of aggression raises an important question, though. A predator this well-armed clearly evolved these weapons for a reason, and prey alone may not fully explain why an animal needs tools this specialized for tearing rather than simply holding. Some of the most compelling evidence about how these weapons actually get used comes not from studying prey at all, but from studying the scars left behind on one of the ocean's largest and most powerful predators. Those scars, found scattered across the skin of sperm whales throughout the Southern Ocean, may represent the clearest evidence available anywhere of exactly how these three-pointed hooks perform when the fight is not against a smaller, weaker animal, but against a predator many times the squid's own size and weight. Sperm whales carry their history on their skin. Scattered across the head, jaw, and body of many adult whales are circular scars, some small, some stretching several inches wide, clustered in patterns that suggest violent, close-range encounters rather than accidental scrapes against rocks or debris. For most of the 20th century, these scars were widely attributed to a single source, the giant squid. That assumption made sense given how much more famous and widely studied the giant squid was compared to its heavier, lesser-known cousin. Giant squid tentacles carry toothed suckers, and those suckers do leave behind circular scarring, consistent with at least some of the marks found on whale skin. But not all the scars fit that pattern cleanly, as researchers began paying closer attention to the specific shape, size, and texture of scarring found on sperm whales throughout the Southern Ocean. Inconsistencies started showing up. Some scars appeared too large, too irregular, or showed signs of tearing rather than the clean, consistent circles expected from simple suction damage. That inconsistency led scientists back to the colossal squid, and specifically to its unusual hook structures. When researchers compared the physical dimensions and shape of colossal squid hooks against the irregular scarring found on many whales, particularly whales caught or studied in regions where colossal squid are known to be common, the match lined up with striking accuracy. This evidence gained additional support from a separate related data source: the frequency of colossal squid beaks found inside sperm whale stomachs throughout the Southern Ocean. In regions where these beaks appeared most often, meaning colossal squid clearly made up a significant portion of a given whale population's diet, the density and severity of unusual scarring on nearby whales tended to increase as well. Put together, this evidence builds a strong case that many of the scars long credited to the giant squid may actually trace back primarily to the colossal squid instead, at least within the specific waters of the Southern Ocean where colossal squid populations are most concentrated. This represents a genuine shift in scientific understanding, correcting decades of assumption based on newer, more careful comparison. What makes this discovery particularly significant is what it reveals about the true nature of these encounters. These are not brief, glancing skirmishes. The severity and pattern of scarring suggest genuinely violent, sustained struggles, fights involving real resistance from the squid, rather than a quick, effortless capture by the whale. That resistance lines up perfectly with everything else known about the colossal squid's weaponry. Rotating hooks capable of twisting mid-grip, three-pointed hooks built specifically for tearing rather than simple holding. a muscular body strong enough to fight back against an animal many times its own size. Every piece of evidence points toward the same conclusion. This is not a passive prey animal. This is a predator that fights back hard every single time, even against odds that are rarely in its favor. Yet, for all this evidence about how the fight unfolds, one crucial detail remains completely unknown to science. Nobody has any real idea how these two animals actually locate each other in total darkness, or what the moments immediately before contact actually look like. Every piece of this story so far has come from evidence left behind after the fact, whether that evidence is a scar, a beak, or a body pulled up in a fishing net. The single piece of hard evidence recovered most often from these encounters is not a scar at all. It is the beak, the one part of the colossal squid's body tough enough to survive completely intact inside a whale's stomach, sometimes for years, long after everything else has been fully digested. Understanding that beak means understanding the one weapon on this squid's body, built not for gripping prey, but for finishing the job entirely. Push past the arms, the hooks, and the mass of soft tissue, and at the very center of the colossal squid's body sits a weapon unlike anything else on its frame. Hidden where all 8 arms and both tentacles meet is a beak, curved, sharp, and strikingly similar in shape to the beak of a large parrot. That comparison is not just a loose description. Squid beaks genuinely resemble bird beaks in basic shape, curved and pointed, built specifically for cutting and tearing rather than crushing flat like teeth. In the colossal squid, this beak reaches a size that matches the rest of its massive body, one of the largest beaks documented in any squid species on Earth. What makes this beak especially remarkable is the material it is built from. Unlike the soft, jelly-like tissue that makes up most of the colossal squid's body, the beak is constructed from an extremely tough, dense substance, closer in hardness to fingernail or hoof material than anything resembling squid flesh. It stands as, by far, the hardest, most rigid structure found anywhere on this otherwise boneless animal. That hardness serves a critical purpose. Every hook, every rotating grip, every ounce of muscular strength in the squid's arms exist primarily to accomplish one final goal, at bringing prey close enough for the beak to finish the job. Once prey is secured, the beak delivers powerful, cutting bites capable of slicing through flesh, shell, and even the tough skin of other squid species. Positioned at the very center of all 8 arms, the beak sits, protected within a ring of muscle and tissue, only extending forward when it is time to actually bite down. This central placement means prey, caught by the arms, gets pulled directly toward the one part of the squid's body built specifically for cutting, almost like a trap slowly closing toward its most dangerous point. For an animal that spends its life hunting other large, capable predators in complete darkness, a soft bite would not be enough. Fish species hunted by the colossal squid, including large, tough-skinned predators like the Antarctic toothfish, require serious cutting power to subdue quickly. The beak provides exactly that, a weapon hard enough and sharp enough to overcome prey that has no intention of giving up easily. The same hardness explains something else entirely unexpected about the colossal squid, something that has quietly become one of the most valuable tools scientists have for studying an animal they can almost never observe directly. While nearly every other part of the squid's body breaks down quickly after death, dissolving into a soft, jelly-like mess within days, the beak survives. It survives digestion inside a predator's stomach. It survives decomposition on the ocean floor. It survives conditions that destroy virtually every other part of the squid's body almost immediately. That durability turns the beak into something close to a fossil record for an animal that leaves almost no other trace behind after it dies or gets eaten. Understanding exactly how tough this structure really is means looking specifically at what happens after a sperm whale successfully catches and eats a colossal squid. Because the beak's journey does not end there. In many cases, it survives for years afterward, quietly sitting inside a whale's stomach long after the rest of the meal has completely disappeared. Digestion is designed to break things down completely. Stomach acid, powerful enzymes, and the slow grinding process of a digestive system exist specifically to dissolve food into pieces small enough for a body to absorb and use. Almost nothing escapes that process intact, especially not soft, water-heavy tissue like most of a colossal squid's body. Yet inside the stomachs of sperm whales, researchers regularly find colossal squid beaks in remarkably good condition, sometimes representing meals eaten years earlier. While the surrounding flesh of each squid disappears completely within the whale's digestive system, the beak survives largely intact, accumulating slowly over time into a growing collection inside the whale's stomach. This happens because sperm whale stomachs are simply not equipped to break down material this tough. The beak's dense, fingernail-like composition resists the same acids and enzymes that easily dissolve muscle and organ tissue. Rather than being destroyed, these beaks essentially get trapped, sitting in the stomach because there is no efficient way for the whale's body to fully process or pass them. Over a whale's lifetime, this can result in an enormous buildup. Researchers examining sperm whale stomachs have documented hundreds of beaks recovered from a single individual animal, representing years, sometimes potentially decades, worth of colossal squid meals eaten across that whale's life. Each beak effectively works like a small, indestructible record of one single hunting encounter. This accumulation creates a genuinely unique research opportunity, because a sperm whale's stomach essentially functions as an unintentional archive. Scientists studying these beak collections can estimate roughly how many colossal squid a single whale consumes over time, and how significant this species is as a dietary staple across the whale's broader population throughout the Southern Ocean. Beak size also provides valuable clues about the squid itself. Because beak dimensions scale predictably with overall body size, researchers can use a single recovered beak to estimate roughly how large the living squid was before it was eaten, even without ever seeing the rest of its body. This method has become one of the primary tools scientists use to estimate the true maximum size colossal squid can reach in the wild. That detail carries enormous significance because full-grown adult colossal squid are almost never recovered whole. Most estimates about just how large this species can grow do not come from measuring an actual complete adult specimen. They come instead from analyzing beak size alone, extrapolating backward from fragments to estimate the true scale of an animal nobody has ever fully measured while still intact. This method comes with real limitations, though. Estimating full body size and weight based purely on a single hard structure without any surrounding soft tissue to confirm those numbers directly leaves plenty of room for uncertainty. Some of the largest size estimates ever proposed for this species rest almost entirely on this kind of indirect beak-based calculation rather than a fully measured, complete specimen. That uncertainty highlights something remarkable about the entire scientific understanding of this animal. An enormous amount of what researchers currently know, from population estimates to maximum body size, comes not from direct observation, but from evidence recovered secondhand, pulled from the stomachs of the very predator that hunts this species most successfully. Nearly everything ever learned about the colossal squid had to be reconstructed this way, piece by piece, almost entirely without the actual animal cooperating in the process. Strip away the beaks, the scars, and the occasional accidental fishing catch, and there is remarkably little left in the scientific record about the colossal squid. This is an animal whose entire body of knowledge had to be built almost exclusively from secondhand evidence, collected after the animal was already dead, usually inside the body of something else entirely. That reality separates the colossal squid from almost every other large animal studied throughout the history of marine biology. Whales, sharks, dolphins, and countless other massive sea creatures have been tagged, tracked, filmed, and observed directly in their natural environments for decades. Researchers can follow a great white shark for months using satellite tags, watching exactly where it travels and how it behaves in real time. None of that has been possible with the colossal squid, at least not until extremely recently. For nearly a full century, the entire scientific understanding of this species rested almost entirely on fragments. Torn arms, beaks recovered from stomachs, and the occasional badly damaged specimen hauled up accidentally by a fishing boat targeting a completely different species. This creates a genuinely unusual situation in the world of biology. Scientists can confidently describe this animal's hooks, its beak, its eyes, and even estimate its maximum possible size, while still having almost no verified information about fundamental aspects of its life. Basic questions that seem obvious for most well-studied animals remain largely unanswered for the colossal squid. How does it actually hunt in real time? Nobody has watched it happen. How does it find a mate in the vast darkness of the Southern Ocean? Nobody knows for certain. How long does it typically live, and what does a normal day actually look like for this animal? These questions remain mostly unanswered, filled in with educated guesses based on close relatives rather than direct observation. This gap between physical description and behavioral understanding exists because studying dead fragments, no matter how carefully examined, can only reveal so much. A beak can reveal size, a scar can reveal evidence of a fight, but neither can reveal how the animal actually behaves while it is alive, swimming through its own natural habitat, going about a normal day, completely undisturbed by human observation. Every other major discovery about this species followed the exact same basic pattern for nearly 100 years. An accidental catch, a stomach recovery, or a fragment washed ashore, followed by careful scientific analysis attempting to squeeze as much information as possible out of whatever small piece happened to be available that time. That pattern eventually produced the very first scientific description of the colossal squid as an entirely new species, and even that milestone did not come from a complete, well-preserved specimen. It came from something far more limited, discovered inside the stomach of a whale in the early 20th century, at a time when almost nothing was known about deep-sea life in the Southern Ocean at all. Understanding exactly how little scientists had to work with during that first discovery helps explain why so much about this animal remained mysterious for so long afterward. An entire species, one that would eventually turn out to be the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, was originally named and classified using nothing more than 2 torn arm fragments pulled from a dead whale's stomach. In the mid-1920s, long before submarines could survive deep ocean pressure and decades before any camera would ever capture footage of the deep sea, a scientist named Guy Coburn Robson sat down to examine an unusual set of remains recovered from inside a sperm whale's stomach near the Falkland Islands. What he found would eventually become one of the most significant discoveries in the history of deep-sea biology. The remains were not a complete animal, they were not even close. Robson had access to just 2 arm crowns, fragments of tentacle material recovered during the processing of a dead sperm whale, likely caught as part of the whaling industry that was still active in that region during this period of history. From those 2 torn fragments alone, Robson identified something entirely new to science. The hooks present on these arm remains did not match any previously known squid species. Their structure, particularly the rotating design that would later become one of this animal's most famous features, stood out as genuinely unique compared to anything documented before that point. Based on this evidence, limited as it was, Robson formally described and named a brand new species in 1925, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, the animal that would eventually become known worldwide as the colossal squid. An entire species, one that would later turn out to be the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, entered the scientific record based on nothing more than 2 arm fragments. This might sound like an impossibly thin foundation for naming an entirely new species, and in many ways it was. But this kind of discovery was far more common during this particular era of marine biology than it would be today. Before submarines, before remotely operated vehicles, before any technology capable of directly observing the deep sea existed, fragments recovered from whale stomachs represented some of the only physical evidence scientists had access to for understanding what actually lived at these extreme depths. Whaling operations, brutal and destructive as they were toward whale populations, inadvertently became one of the only windows science had into deep sea life during this period. Every whale processed for oil or meat carried a stomach full of evidence about what it had been eating, evidence that would have otherwise remained completely inaccessible to human researchers working from the surface. Robson's discovery placed the colossal squid on the scientific map, but it left nearly everything else about the species a complete mystery. Size, behavior, habitat range, reproduction, all of it remained pure speculation based on nothing more than 2 torn arm fragments and a general understanding of how other squid species typically behaved. For decades following that initial discovery, almost nothing changed. No complete specimen turned up. No further significant remains were recovered. The colossal squid existed in scientific literature as a named official species, and yet almost nobody, including the scientists studying it, had any real sense of what a living one actually looked like beyond a rough sketch built from limited fragments and educated guesswork. That silence would stretch on for the better part of a century, an entire species sitting in the scientific record as little more than a name and a handful of unanswered questions. It would take decades of scattered evidence, additional stomach discoveries, and eventually a series of extraordinary strokes of luck before researchers would finally get their hands on something scientists had been waiting almost 80 years to see: a truly complete colossal squid specimen. For nearly 80 years after Robson named the species, the colossal squid remained one of science's strangest half-mysteries. Researchers had a name, a rough anatomical sketch built from fragments, and almost nothing else. No complete adult specimen had ever been examined in full, start to finish, by any scientist anywhere in the world. That gap did not come from a lack of trying. Throughout the 20th century, occasional pieces continued turning up, mostly recovered from sperm whale stomachs during the whaling era, which continued in various forms across parts of the Southern Ocean well into the 1970s. Each new fragment added a small detail, another beak here, another partial arm there, slowly expanding the picture piece by piece. But fragments alone could only reveal so much. Scientists could measure a beak and estimate size. They could examine a hook and understand its structure. What they could not do was study how all these individual pieces actually fit together inside one complete intact body, or observe details that only show up when an entire specimen is preserved well enough for full examination. Part of the problem came down to where this animal actually lives. The Southern Ocean remains one of the most remote, difficult, and expensive regions on Earth to reach for sustained scientific research. Even today, sending a research vessel deep into these frigid waters requires massive planning, specialized equipment, and significant funding, resources that were even harder to secure throughout most of the 20th century. The other half of the problem involved the animal's own body chemistry. Remember the ammonium-rich tissue that keeps the colossal squid weightless in deep water, that same soft, chemically unstable tissue that makes the squid nearly impossible to eat also makes it extremely difficult to preserve after death. Without immediate careful freezing, a colossal squid's body begins breaking down rapidly, dissolving into an unrecognizable mess within a surprisingly short window of time. This meant that even when fishing boats did occasionally snag a colossal squid by accident, usually while targeting the deep-dwelling Antarctic toothfish instead, the resulting specimen often arrived at the surface already damaged, decomposing, or missing significant portions of its body. Getting a genuinely complete, well-preserved adult was not just rare, it required an enormous amount of luck happening at exactly the right moment. Throughout this long stretch of near silence, the colossal squid slowly built a reputation as one of the last great mysteries of the ocean, a creature large enough to be the heaviest invertebrate on the planet, and yet still essentially unknown in any real biological detail. Documentaries speculated about it, museums displayed rough models based on educated guesswork, but actual, complete scientific data remained frustratingly out of reach. That changed in dramatic fashion in the year 2007, when a fishing crew working in the frigid waters near Antarctica encountered something that would completely transform scientific understanding of this species almost overnight. What happened during that encounter, and in the tense hours immediately afterward, would become one of the most significant moments in the entire history of deep-sea biology. In February 2007, a fishing vessel called the San Aspiring was working the frigid waters of the Ross Sea near Antarctica, targeting Antarctic toothfish using long fishing lines set thousands of feet below the surface. As the crew began hauling in one of the lines, they realized something enormous had gotten tangled in the equipment, something far larger than any toothfish they had ever pulled up before. What emerged from the water was not a fish at all. It was a colossal squid, fully grown, and remarkably, still alive as it broke the surface. This was, by a massive margin, the largest and most complete colossal squid specimen anyone had ever successfully recovered in the entire history of scientific research on this species. The animal had apparently been in the process of eating a toothfish that had already taken the fishing hook, and in doing so, had become tangled in the line itself. This single detail, an accidental encounter born from ordinary commercial fishing rather than any deliberate research expedition, once again proved to be the primary source of nearly every major colossal squid discovery in scientific history. The squid did not come up peacefully. Eyewitness accounts from the crew describe a violent, chaotic struggle as they worked to bring the animal fully on board. It fought back forcefully, using its powerful arms and rotating hooks against the very people trying to capture it, a direct, real-world demonstration of the same aggressive defensive behavior scientists had only previously inferred from old scars and preserved specimens. Bringing an animal this size on board required real effort and no small amount of danger for the crew involved. This was not a small fish being reeled in calmly. This was an animal weighing hundreds of pounds, armed with hooks capable of causing serious injury, thrashing violently as it was slowly hauled up from the icy water and onto the deck of the ship. Once the crew finally secured the squid, a new and equally urgent problem immediately took over, keeping the specimen intact long enough to preserve it properly for scientific study. This was not a simple task. As discussed earlier, colossal squid tissue begins breaking down rapidly after death, and this particular specimen represented an opportunity too significant to risk losing to decomposition. The crew and scientists involved made the decision to freeze the entire animal, whole, as quickly as conditions on the ship would allow. This was widely considered the safest method available at the time to preserve as much anatomical detail as possible, even though the process itself came with serious risks and no guarantee of success. That decision, made under pressure in freezing conditions aboard a working fishing vessel far from any proper laboratory, would ultimately determine whether nearly a century of scientific mystery could finally be resolved, or whether this rare, complete specimen would be lost to decomposition before it ever reached scientists capable of studying it properly. What followed was less a celebration and more a race against time, a delicate, high-stakes effort to keep a massive, chemically unstable animal frozen and intact across a journey that would ultimately take it from the icy waters near Antarctica all the way to a museum laboratory in New Zealand, where researchers were waiting anxiously for the chance to finally examine a colossal squid, the way scientists had wanted to for the better part of a century. The moment the colossal squid broke the surface of the water aboard the San Aspiring, it became immediately clear this would not be a simple recovery. Unlike a fish, which typically goes still or struggles weakly once out of water, this animal remained aggressive and combative throughout the entire process of being brought on board. Crew members involved in the recovery described a genuinely dangerous struggle. The squid's arms, still powerful even as the animal was being pulled from its natural environment, continued grasping and gripping at anything within reach, including the equipment and, at moments, the people working to secure it. Those rotating hooks, the same weapons responsible for scarring sperm whales twice the length of a school bus, remained fully capable of causing serious injury to a human handler. This behavior offered something scientists had never had direct access to before, a live, observable demonstration of exactly how this animal defends itself when threatened. Every previous piece of evidence about the colossal squid's combat behavior had come from second-hand sources, scars on whale skin, or torn fragments recovered after the fact. This was different. This was the actual behavior happening in real time, witnessed directly by people standing right there on the deck. The struggle confirmed something researchers had long suspected based on indirect evidence alone. This is not a passive animal that simply gets captured or eaten without resistance. Even while being hauled up from its home in the deep, injured, and completely out of its natural element, the colossal squid continued fighting using every weapon available on its body. Eventually, the crew managed to secure the animal, though not without real effort and genuine risk during the process. What they had on deck was, without question, the most significant colossal squid specimen ever recovered up to that point in scientific history, remarkably intact and, until just moments earlier, still alive. That combination, a complete body and documented aggressive behavior witnessed directly by multiple people, made this catch immediately and obviously important. Word of the recovery spread quickly through the small, tightly connected community of scientists who specialized in deep-sea cephalopod research, researchers who had waited their entire careers for exactly this kind of opportunity. But excitement over the discovery immediately collided with a serious and pressing problem. The squid was already dead by the time it was fully secured, and its uniquely unstable body chemistry meant the clock was now actively working against everyone involved. Every hour that passed without proper preservation increased the risk that this specimen, easily the most significant find in the entire history of colossal squid research, could break down and become useless for detailed scientific study. What happened next aboard that fishing vessel in the hours immediately following the animal's capture would determine whether this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity actually translated into real scientific knowledge, or whether it would simply become another story of a remarkable catch lost to the same decomposition problem that had frustrated researchers for the better part of a century. A colossal squid does not decompose like most animals. Its ammonium-rich, water-heavy tissue, the same chemistry that keeps it weightless in deep water, also makes it remarkably unstable once the animal dies. Without fast, careful preservation, that soft, gelatinous body can begin breaking down within a surprisingly short window of time, turning a scientifically priceless specimen into an unusable, dissolving mess. Aboard the San Aspiring, the crew and onboard staff understood they were working against that exact clock. This was, by a wide margin, the most complete colossal squid specimen anyone had ever successfully recovered, and losing it to decomposition would mean losing an opportunity that might not come around again for decades, if ever. The decision was made to freeze the entire animal as quickly as the ship's equipment would allow. This approach came with serious risks. Freezing an animal this large, all at once using equipment designed primarily for storing fish catches rather than preserving delicate scientific specimens, is far from a perfect process. Ice crystals forming unevenly throughout the tissue can cause damage, distorting or destroying fine anatomical details that scientists would eventually want to study closely. Despite these risks, freezing represented the best realistic option available under the circumstances. The alternative, attempting to preserve the specimen through other chemical methods without proper laboratory equipment on a remote fishing vessel, carried an even higher risk of losing the animal entirely before it ever reached a facility capable of studying it properly. Once frozen, the specimen faced an entirely new challenge: transportation. The squid needed to travel from the remote waters near Antarctica all the way to a research facility equipped to handle a specimen of this scientific significance. That journey ultimately led to Te Papa Tongarewa, the Museum of New Zealand, where a team of scientists specializing in deep-sea cephalopods had been anxiously awaiting news of exactly this kind of discovery. Keeping the specimen frozen throughout that entire journey required careful coordination, specialized transport, and constant attention to make sure the delicate balance between the animal's frozen state and its overall structural integrity remained intact the whole way. Any failure at any point in that chain could have undone the entire effort. When the specimen finally arrived safely at the museum, the real scientific work could finally begin. Researchers now had access to something that had eluded science for the better part of a century: a genuinely complete, reasonably well-preserved adult colossal squid, ready for detailed examination using modern scientific tools and techniques that simply had not existed during the animal's initial discovery back in 1925. The process of actually thawing and examining this specimen would itself become a carefully documented scientific event, watched closely by researchers and the public alike. But before that examination could reveal new details about anatomy and behavior, scientists first needed to confirm something more basic. They needed to understand exactly what this animal's body actually looked like while it was still alive, including features that had never been properly documented before, like the way its skin could apparently change color and appearance in ways nobody had fully studied up close until now. Deep in the Southern Ocean, where sunlight never reaches, color might seem like a pointless feature for any animal to have. Yet the colossal squid's skin does something remarkable, shifting in appearance rapidly, moving between an almost invisible, glass-like transparency and a deep reddish color, sometimes within just seconds. This transformation is most dramatic in younger colossal squid. Juveniles, like the small individual captured on camera during the historic 2025 sighting, often appear almost completely see-through, their internal organs faintly visible beneath skin, with barely any pigment at all. This transparency offers a powerful form of camouflage in open water, where there is nowhere to hide behind rocks or coral, and blending directly into the water itself becomes the best available defense. As colossal squid grow larger and move into deeper water, their bodies gradually shift away from this transparency, developing darker, more solid coloring suited to a different survival strategy. In the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean, being invisible against open water matters less than in shallower zones, since there is often no light at all for a predator to see by in the first place. Down there, other defenses become more important than transparency alone. But even beyond this gradual, long-term color shift as the animal matures, colossal squid, like most squid species, can also change their appearance rapidly, in real time, using specialized cells embedded directly in their skin. These cells, called chromatophores, contain tiny sacs of pigment that can expand or contract almost instantly, controlled directly by the animal's nervous system. When a chromatophore expands, it reveals more of its pigment, deepening the color visible at that specific point on the skin. When it contracts, that pigment shrinks down to nearly nothing, allowing more light to pass through and making that same patch of skin appear lighter or more transparent. Multiply this effect across millions of these cells spread across the squid's entire body, and the result is an animal capable of shifting its overall appearance dramatically in a matter of seconds. This system likely serves multiple purposes for the colossal squid, even in the deep sea. Rapid color changes could play a role in communication between individuals, though almost nothing is confirmed about how or whether colossal squid actually use color this way. It could also serve as a startle response, a sudden shift in appearance possibly meant to confuse or momentarily distract a predator during a critical moment of an attack, because this behavior has never been directly observed in a live adult colossal squid in its natural deep-sea habitat. Much of what scientists understand about this color-shifting ability comes from studying smaller, more accessible squid species, along with limited observations of preserved specimens and the brief video captured during the historic 2025 juvenile sighting. That juvenile footage did offer scientists a rare, direct glimpse at this transparency in action, confirming details long assumed based on preserved specimens alone. But it also raised new questions about how this appearance might continue changing as the animal grows larger and moves into the darkest, most extreme depths, where full adults are believed to spend the majority of their lives, a transition that remains almost entirely unobserved and unexplained by direct scientific evidence. Underneath the colossal squid's skin sits one of the fastest color-changing systems found anywhere in the animal kingdom. These structures, called chromatophores, work nothing like the slow, gradual color shifts seen in animals like chameleons. Instead, they operate on a timescale closer to a light switch, flipping on and off, controlled directly by the squid's own nervous system. Each individual chromatophore is essentially a tiny, stretchy sac filled with pigment, surrounded by a ring of small muscles. When those muscles contract, they physically stretch the sac wide open, spreading the pigment across a larger area and making that section of skin appear darker and more visible. When the muscles relax, the sac shrinks back down, concentrating the pigment into a tiny dot and allowing the skin around it to appear lighter or nearly transparent again. What makes this system remarkable is the direct nerve connection involved. Unlike many biological color changes that rely on hormones and unfold gradually over minutes or even hours, chromatophores connect directly to nerve cells, allowing the squid's brain to trigger changes almost instantly. This is closer to flexing a muscle on command than it is to the slow color shift of a chameleon's skin. Multiply a single chromatophore across the millions likely present throughout the colossal squid's body, and the potential for rapid, large-scale color change becomes enormous. In smaller, better-studied squid species, scientists have documented waves of color rippling across an animal's body in real time, patterns shifting and pulsing within fractions of a second, all controlled by direct nerve signals rather than slower chemical processes. For an animal like the colossal squid, living in a place where visual communication might seem pointless given the complete darkness of its deepest habitat, the system likely still serves important purposes at multiple points throughout its life. During its transparent juvenile stage, chromatophores may allow young squid to fine-tune their transparency, adjusting based on lighting conditions in the relatively shallow water where they spend their earliest months. As adults move into deeper, darker water, the practical use of visible color change becomes less obvious. Though some researchers suspect rapid color shift could still play a role during high-stress moments, such as an active predator encounter. A sudden shift in appearance, even in near-total darkness, might create a brief flash detectable by a predator's own light-sensitive systems, possibly serving as a split-second startle response during a critical life-or-death moment. Much of this remains genuinely uncertain, since no scientist has ever directly observed a full, adult colossal squid using this system in its natural deep-sea environment. Most confirmed knowledge about chromatophore behavior in this species comes from smaller relatives, along with limited direct observation from the brief juvenile footage captured during the historic 2025 expedition. That gap between confirmed science and reasonable inference runs throughout nearly every aspect of colossal squid research, and it becomes especially significant when considering another deeply unsettling detail about this animal's life in the deep sea. What happens when food becomes scarce, and there is nothing left to hunt except another squid, exactly like itself? Food is never guaranteed in the deep sea. Unlike shallow coastal waters, where sunlight fuels abundant plant and algae growth supporting an entire food chain, the deep ocean survives almost entirely on scraps, organic material slowly drifting down from the sunlit waters far above. This makes food scarcity a constant, ongoing challenge for nearly every creature living at these extreme depths. For an animal as large as the colossal squid, that scarcity presents a serious problem. Maintaining a body weighing hundreds of pounds requires substantial amounts of food, and going too long without a successful meal can threaten survival directly. In an environment this unpredictable, opportunistic feeding, meaning eating whatever becomes available rather than being extremely selective, often becomes a necessary survival strategy. Evidence gathered from stomach content analysis across multiple research studies suggests the colossal squid's typical diet consists primarily of fish, particularly the Antarctic toothfish, along with other squid species living in the same deep waters. This fits the general expectation for a large, active predator occupying a high position in the southern ocean food chain. But researchers examining stomach contents have also documented something more unsettling, evidence suggesting that colossal squid may sometimes prey on members of their own species. This behavior, known scientifically as cannibalism, is not entirely unusual among cephalopods broadly, Several squid and octopus species have been documented engaging in similar behavior under specific circumstances, particularly when food becomes scarce or when a larger individual encounters a significantly smaller one. For the colossal squid specifically, direct evidence of this behavior remains limited, based primarily on remains found within the stomachs of a small number of examined specimens. This is not the kind of behavior that has been directly observed happening in real time. Like nearly everything else known about this species, cannibalism has been inferred from indirect evidence rather than witnessed firsthand. Still, the biological reasoning behind this behavior makes sense within the broader context of how these animals likely live. In an environment where finding any meal at all can be difficult and unpredictable, an opportunistic predator willing to attack nearly anything smaller than itself, regardless of species, holds a significant survival advantage over one that remains highly selective about prey. This willingness to attack members of its own species may also help explain something else researchers have long wondered about: why fully grown adult colossal squid seem to spend most of their lives alone, rather than gathering in groups the way some other ocean species do. If a larger individual poses a genuine threat to a smaller one of the same species, staying solitary and avoiding other colossal squid entirely might actually improve an individual's odds of long-term survival. This solitary lifestyle carries significant consequences beyond just feeding behavior, though. It also makes an already difficult research subject even harder to study, since colossal squid likely do not gather in predictable locations or numbers the way schooling fish or social marine mammals often do. Understanding how these animals eventually find each other for reproduction, given this apparent tendency toward solitude and even aggression toward their own kind, remains one of the many significant gaps in current scientific knowledge about this elusive species. That gap becomes especially significant when considering the earliest, most vulnerable stage of a colossal squid's life, the transparent drifting juveniles that must somehow survive on their own from the very beginning, navigating a dangerous ocean with no protection beyond their own see-through skin and whatever instincts they were born with. Long before a colossal squid grows large enough to challenge a sperm whale, it begins life as something almost entirely different: a tiny, nearly invisible juvenile drifting through relatively shallow water, completely alone, with no parental protection of any kind. This early stage of life could not look more different from the massive, heavily armed adult it will eventually become. Colossal squid juveniles typically inhabit water ranging from around 60 feet down to roughly 500 feet below the surface, a zone still reached by at least some sunlight, unlike the pitch-black depths where adults are believed to spend most of their lives. This relatively shallow starting point places young colossal squid within reach of an entirely different set of predators than the ones adults primarily need to worry about: toothfish, seals, seabirds like albatrosses, and various other mid-depth predators all pose a genuine threat to these small, vulnerable juveniles. Unlike adults, which rely primarily on massive eyes and powerful weapons for defense, young colossal squid depend almost entirely on a completely different survival strategy: simply not being seen at all. This is where that near-total transparency becomes so critical. A young colossal squid's body allows light to pass through it almost as easily as it passes through the surrounding water itself, making the animal extremely difficult for predators hunting by sight to detect, even at relatively close range. Internal organs remain faintly visible, but the overall effect creates an animal that essentially blends directly into open water. This strategy makes sense specifically because there is nowhere else to hide in this environment. Unlike a fish living near a coral reef, which can dart behind rocks or into crevices when threatened, an animal drifting through open, featureless water has no physical hiding spots available. Transparency solves that problem by turning the water itself into the only camouflage the animal will ever need. As these juveniles continue growing, they gradually begin a slow migration into deeper water, a process scientists refer to as ontogenetic descent, meaning a shift in habitat depth that occurs naturally as an animal ages and grows larger. This gradual sinking journey eventually carries the colossal squid from the relatively shallow juvenile zone down into the extreme depths where full adults are believed to spend the majority of their lives. That transition does not happen overnight, and it does not happen without changes to the squid's body along the way. As these animals move deeper, their transparency gradually fades, replaced by darker, more solid coloring, better suited to a completely different survival strategy, one based less on staying invisible and more on simply avoiding detection in an environment already defined by total darkness. This shift from a transparent juvenile to a darker, more heavily built adult represents one of the most dramatic transformations in the colossal squid's entire life cycle, and it happens almost entirely outside the view of scientists. No research team has ever tracked a single individual colossal squid through this complete transition, from its earliest transparent stage all the way through to full adult maturity in the deep sea, a level of continuous study made nearly impossible by the sheer difficulty of locating and following this species across changing depths over an extended period of time. Growth for a colossal squid means more than simply getting larger. It means an entire transformation, a slow, steady shift from a nearly invisible juvenile drifting in relatively shallow water into a darker, heavier adult built for an environment where light does not exist at all. This process unfolds gradually, likely across a period of several years, though exact timelines remain uncertain due to the extreme difficulty of studying this species continuously over time. As colossal squid grow and migrate into progressively deeper water, their transparent, glass-like skin slowly gives way to darker, more solid coloring. Scientists believe this shift connects directly to the changing demands of a deeper habitat, where the very trait that once provided perfect camouflage, transparency, becomes far less useful once an animal descends into water where almost no light reaches at all. In relatively shallow water, even faint sunlight filtering down from the surface can silhouette a solid, opaque body, making it easier for predators to spot. Transparency solves that problem directly. But once an animal descends far enough that essentially no ambient light remains, that same advantage largely disappears since there is no light left for a predator to use in spotting a silhouette in the first place. At those extreme depths, a different survival strategy becomes more important. Rather than relying on invisibility, deep-dwelling adult colossal squid likely benefit more from simply avoiding unnecessary movement or disturbance that could alert nearby predators using senses like sound or vibration, since deep-sea predators like sperm whales already hunt without relying heavily on eyesight in the first place. This gradual color transition remains one of the least directly observed aspects of the colossal squid's entire life cycle. No continuous study has ever tracked a single individual animal through this complete transformation from transparent juvenile to fully mature, darker adult. Instead, scientists have pieced this process together by comparing juveniles and adults captured or recovered at different points across many years and multiple separate expeditions, essentially building a single continuous story out of many disconnected snapshots. That approach carries real limitations. Without directly observing this transition happen in a single individual over time, researchers cannot say with complete certainty exactly how gradual or sudden this color shift really is, or whether other significant changes to the animal's body might be happening simultaneously that current evidence simply has not captured yet. What does seem clear, based on every specimen examined so far, is that this transformation genuinely occurs. Juveniles captured in shallower water consistently display far greater transparency than adult specimens recovered from significantly deeper locations, a pattern strong and consistent enough across multiple independent examinations to be considered reliable scientific evidence, even without a single continuous case study confirming the complete process from start to finish. This transformation from a nearly invisible juvenile into a dark, powerful adult represents one of the most significant unanswered chapters in the colossal squid's entire life story. For nearly a century, virtually every piece of this transformation had to be pieced together indirectly, without a single confirmed sighting of a live juvenile anywhere in its natural deep-sea habitat. That changed dramatically and unexpectedly in March of 2025, when a research vessel exploring remote Antarctic waters captured something no scientist had ever managed to record before. On March 9, 2025, a research vessel called Falkor 2, operated by the Schmidt Ocean Institute, was conducting a routine deep-sea survey near the South Sandwich Islands, a remote cluster of islands in the far reaches of the South Atlantic Ocean. The expedition's primary goal was broad exploration, documenting whatever unusual deep-sea life the team happened to encounter, rather than specifically searching for any single target species. The remotely operated vehicle, a submersible named Sebastian, was descending through the water column, streaming live video footage back to the research vessel above. Cameras mounted on the submersible captured everything within view. Standard procedure for this kind of broad exploratory survey, where researchers never know exactly what they might come across next. At a depth of roughly 600 meters, nearly 2,000 feet below the surface, something drifted directly into the camera's field of view. A small, translucent animal, its body faintly visible against the surrounding darkness, moved slowly past the submersible's lights, seemingly unbothered by the machine's presence nearby. Nobody aboard the ship immediately recognized exactly what they were looking at. This is where a detail makes this discovery particularly remarkable. It was not initially a professional scientist who first raised the alarm. According to accounts from the expedition, an online viewer watching the live stream footage from somewhere else entirely first suggested that this small drifting animal might actually be a colossal squid, a species nobody had ever successfully filmed alive in its natural deep sea habitat. That observation triggered a rapid response from the science team. Rather than relying solely on their own initial assessment, researchers aboard the vessel reached out to independent squid experts not present on the expedition, sending along the captured footage for closer examination and formal identification. This kind of external verification matters enormously in scientific research, especially for a claim this significant. One of the experts consulted was Kat Bolstad, a squid researcher based at the Auckland University of Technology, who had spent years studying deep-sea cephalopods without ever having access to live footage of an actual colossal squid in its natural environment. Upon reviewing the footage closely, Bolstad and other independent experts confirmed what the online viewer had initially suspected. The animal captured on camera was, without question, a colossal squid, a young juvenile measuring roughly 1 foot in length, its body displaying exactly the kind of transparency scientists had long associated with this species' earliest life stage, based entirely on preserved specimens studied in laboratories. This was the first time that transparency had ever been directly observed and recorded in a genuinely live, freely swimming individual. The confirmation set off immediate excitement throughout the deep-sea research community. This represented the very first confirmed live sighting of a colossal squid in its natural habitat in the entire history of the species, spanning back to its initial scientific discovery exactly 100 years earlier. What had started as a routine, unplanned moment during a broad exploratory survey had unexpectedly become one of the most significant wildlife discoveries of the entire year. Confirming a discovery this significant does not happen instantly, even when the footage itself looks fairly convincing on first viewing. For researchers specializing in deep-sea cephalopods, a species as purely documented as the colossal squid demands extreme caution before making any kind of public announcement, since a mistaken identification could seriously damage scientific credibility across an entire field of study. When Kat Bolstad first received the footage from the Falkor expedition, her reaction reportedly combined genuine excitement with careful, deliberate skepticism. Years of studying this species primarily through preserved specimens and secondhand fragments had taught her exactly how easy it would be to misidentify a completely different deep-sea creature as something far more significant than it actually was. Several features needed to line up precisely before any confident identification could be made. The distinctive hooks along the animal's arms, visible even on a small juvenile, needed to match the specific pattern known from preserved colossal squid specimens. The overall body proportions, the shape of the fins, and the specific type of transparency all needed to fit the expected profile for this exact species, rather than any of several other deep-sea squid species that might superficially appear similar at first glance in low-resolution footage. After careful, methodical review comparing the footage frame by frame against known anatomical reference points, Bolstad and the other independent experts consulted reached a confident, shared conclusion. This animal was, without meaningful doubt, a genuine colossal squid, caught on camera alive and swimming freely through its own natural habitat for the very first time in recorded scientific history. The significance of this moment went beyond just the identification itself. Bolstad later described the discovery in terms that reflected genuine emotional weight for someone who had dedicated years of professional research toward understanding a species she had never once seen alive. Watching a young colossal squid move naturally through open water, completely unaware that it was being observed at all, offered a level of direct insight into the species that no preserved specimen could ever provide. That timing carried its own significant weight as well. The sighting occurred just months before 2025, marked exactly 100 years since Robson had first formally described the species using nothing more than 2 torn arm fragments recovered from a dead whale's stomach. An entire century of scientific study, built almost entirely from second-hand fragments and indirect evidence, had finally produced a direct, confirmed glimpse of a living individual. News of the confirmed sighting spread rapidly once the Schmidt Ocean Institute made the discovery public. Major news outlets around the world picked up the story within days, and video clips of the small, glass-like squid drifting silently through the deep circulated widely across social media platforms, introducing millions of people to an animal that had spent the previous century as little more than an obscure scientific curiosity. For researchers who had spent their careers studying this elusive species, though, the significance extended well beyond public attention or media coverage. This moment represented genuine scientific progress, a foundational first step toward finally being able to study live colossal squid behavior directly, rather than relying entirely on inference and educated guesswork built from fragments and scars. Robson's original 1925 description of the colossal squid rested on two torn arm fragments, evidence so limited that entire aspects of the animal's basic appearance remained pure speculation for decades afterward. Exactly 100 years later, in 2025, scientists finally watched a living colossal squid swim freely through open water, captured on camera in complete, uninterrupted motion. That century-long gap represents one of the longest stretches in modern biological science, between a species' initial formal discovery and the first confirmed direct observation of a living individual in its natural habitat. Most animals discovered and named during the early 20th century have since been extensively filmed, studied, and observed directly, often within just a few decades of the initial scientific description. The colossal squid stands as a genuine outlier in this regard, a powerful reminder of just how much of the deep ocean remains almost entirely unexplored, even in an era defined by extraordinarily advanced technology. Despite submarines, remotely operated vehicles, satellite tracking, and decades of dedicated marine research funding, this particular species managed to avoid direct observation for an entire century. Part of that gap comes down to simple probability. The deep Southern Ocean covers an enormous area stretching across the entire circumference of Antarctica, and colossal squid, especially adults, likely spend the vast majority of their lives at extreme depths rarely visited by any research vessel. Finding one specific animal in an area this vast, without any reliable way to predict its exact location, comes down largely to chance. The 2025 sighting itself perfectly illustrates that element of luck. The Falco expedition was not specifically searching for colossal squid at all. Researchers were conducting broad exploratory survey work, documenting whatever deep-sea life happened to appear in their path. The juvenile squid simply drifted into view, an entirely unplanned encounter that happened to occur at exactly the right depth, at exactly the right moment, with cameras already rolling and capturing everything in real time. That element of chance highlights something important about the current state of deep-sea exploration more broadly. Even with modern technology capable of reaching extreme ocean depths, actual discovery frequently still depends heavily on being in the right place at precisely the right time, rather than any kind of deliberate, targeted search effort. For scientists like Kat Bolstad, who had waited years for exactly this kind of opportunity, the 2025 sighting represented far more than just a single successful observation. It represented proof that direct study of live colossal squid behavior was genuinely possible, opening the door to future research that could eventually answer questions about this species that had remained unresolved for the past 100 years. Yet even this landmark achievement came with a significant limitation. The animal filmed during this historic sighting was not a full-grown adult. It was a small juvenile, barely 1 foot in length, representing only the earliest, most vulnerable stage of a life cycle that eventually produces an animal capable of fighting off a sperm whale several times its own length. The truly massive, fully mature adults that give this species its name and its fearsome reputation remain, even now, completely unfilmed and unobserved in their natural deep-sea environment. One detail from the historic 2025 footage stands out beyond the discovery itself: the squid's complete lack of reaction to the presence of the observing submersible. As Sebastian's lights illuminated the surrounding water and its cameras rolled, capturing what would become one of the most significant wildlife recordings of the decade, the young colossal squid simply continued drifting along, seemingly unbothered by the machine nearby. This behavior makes sense given the animal's natural history. In its entire evolutionary past, spanning millions of years, the colossal squid has never once encountered anything resembling a research submersible. Nothing about its instincts or survival behaviors evolved in response to slow-moving, brightly lit machines drifting quietly through its habitat. From the squid's perspective, Sebastian likely registered as nothing more than an unfamiliar, non-threatening presence, easily ignored. That calm indifference offered researchers something genuinely valuable. A brief, unfiltered glimpse of natural behavior, completely uninfluenced by any fear response or defensive reaction. Unlike the violent, combative struggle documented during the 2007 fishing vessel encounter, this footage captured an animal simply existing, moving through its environment exactly as it would if no observer were present at all. Researchers noted specific details from this natural movement that added genuine new information to the existing scientific record. The way the squid propelled itself through the water, the positioning of its arms while drifting rather than actively hunting or fleeing, and the specific texture and behavior of its transparent skin under natural, undisturbed conditions all provided direct confirmation of details that had previously existed only as reasonable inference based on preserved, dead specimens. This distinction between observing living behavior and examining preserved anatomy matters enormously in biological science. A dead specimen, no matter how well preserved, can only reveal so much about how an animal actually behaves while alive. Muscles that once moved fluidly become rigid. Skin that once shifted color in response to nerve signals goes permanently still. An enormous amount of information about how an animal genuinely lives simply disappears the moment it dies. The 2025 footage, brief as it was, began closing that gap for the colossal squid, even if only for this earliest, smallest life stage. For the first time, scientists could directly observe how a live juvenile actually moved through open water, information that no amount of careful specimen analysis could have ever fully provided on its own. That successful sighting also carried an important symbolic weight for the broader scientific community studying deep-sea life. It served as clear proof that continued, sustained, deep-sea exploration efforts genuinely can produce meaningful new discoveries, even for a species that had managed to avoid direct observation for an entire century of dedicated scientific interest and occasional research attention. But even with this genuine breakthrough achieved, the vast majority of the colossal squid's life story remains completely unobserved. The juvenile captured on camera in 2025 represents only the very beginning of this species' complete life cycle. Somewhere in the deepest, darkest reaches of the Southern Ocean, full-grown adults, potentially weighing over 1,000 pounds each, continue living their entire lives completely unfilmed, unphotographed, and unobserved by any human being. Despite the genuine breakthrough achieved by the 2025 sighting, one enormous gap in scientific knowledge remains completely unresolved. Every confirmed piece of visual evidence ever captured of a living colossal squid, without exception, has involved either juveniles or, at most, subadult individuals still far smaller than the true maximum size this species is believed to reach. No fully mature, full-grown, adult colossal squid has ever been filmed alive in its natural deep-sea habitat. Not once, in the entire recorded history of ocean exploration. This remains true even after the historic 2025 discovery, which, while genuinely groundbreaking, only managed to capture footage of a young juvenile measuring roughly 1 foot in length, a small fraction of the size a full adult is believed to eventually reach. This gap exists primarily because of where full adults are believed to live. While juveniles inhabit relatively shallow water, gradually reachable by research submersibles conducting broader exploratory surveys, adults are thought to descend into much deeper water, potentially exceeding a mile below the surface in some cases. Reaching those extreme depths requires far more specialized equipment, and even then, actually locating one specific animal within that vast, dark expanse remains an enormous challenge. Every piece of evidence scientists currently have about adult colossal squid anatomy comes from dead or dying specimens, recovered either from sperm whale stomachs or from accidental fishing catches, like the famous 2007 specimen pulled up by the San Aspiring. Not a single confirmed piece of video or photographic evidence exists showing a genuinely full-grown adult swimming freely, undisturbed, in its natural deep-sea environment. This absence leaves entire categories of basic behavioral questions completely unanswered. Scientists do not know exactly how adult colossal squid hunt in real time, what their typical swimming patterns look like during normal activity, or how they specifically respond when encountering potential threats like an approaching sperm whale. beyond what can be inferred indirectly from old battle scars and stomach contents examined long after the fact. Reproduction remains an even deeper mystery. No scientist has ever directly observed colossal squid mating behavior. Current understanding relies entirely on general assumptions extended from better studied squid relatives, along with limited physical evidence gathered from examining reproductive organs in the small handful of adult specimens that have been recovered and studied over the past century. This means that even with the historic achievement of the 2025 juvenile sighting, the deepest and most significant mysteries surrounding adult colossal squid behavior remain completely untouched. An entire life stage of this species, arguably the most scientifically significant stage, continues existing almost entirely outside direct human observation, protected by the sheer depth, darkness, and remoteness of its preferred habitat. That gap represents one of the last major frontiers remaining in the study of large ocean animals. While humans have successfully filmed, tracked, and studied nearly every other major species on the planet in direct detail, the adult colossal squid remains a genuine exception, an animal heavier than a grand piano, sharing this planet with humanity right now that has never once been witnessed alive by any person in its true, fully mature form. Strip away every confirmed scientific fact about the colossal squid, and what remains is an enormous list of basic questions that still have no verified answer. This is an animal whose weight, hook structure, and eye size scientists can describe in precise detail, while entire fundamental aspects of its actual life remain almost completely unknown. Hunting behavior sits near the top of that list. While researchers have confirmed the general components involved, the rotating hooks, the powerful beak, the massive eyes theoretically built for spotting prey or predators in darkness, nobody has ever directly witnessed a full adult colossal squid actually execute a hunt in real time. Every detail about how these individual pieces actually work together during an active hunting sequence remains educated speculation rather than confirmed observation. Reproduction remains even more uncertain. Scientists believe colossal squid are gonochoric, meaning individuals are either male or female rather than possessing both reproductive systems, a trait shared with most other cephalopod species. Based on this general pattern, researchers assume mating likely involves close physical contact, with males transferring sperm packets directly to females through some form of direct contact behavior, but this remains largely inferred from studying better documented, more accessible squid species rather than confirmed through any direct observation of colossal squid themselves. Nobody knows exactly how these animals locate potential mates across the vast, dark expanse of the Southern Ocean, especially given their apparent tendency toward solitary living and even occasional cannibalistic behavior toward members of their own species. Lifespan presents another significant unknown. Scientists can make rough estimates based on growth patterns documented in captured specimens of varying sizes, along with general comparisons to related squid species with better documented life cycles. But no research has ever successfully tracked a single individual colossal squid across its complete lifespan, from juvenile through full maturity and eventual death, making any specific lifespan estimate largely speculative. Even death itself remains a mystery for this species. Many squid species are known to die shortly after their single reproductive event, a pattern common throughout the broader cephalopod family. Whether colossal squid follow this exact same pattern, or whether their life cycle differs in some meaningful way given their extreme size and the extraordinary depths at which they live, remains completely unconfirmed by any direct scientific evidence. This overwhelming list of unknowns exists entirely because of where this animal spends the vast majority of its life. The deep southern ocean is genuinely one of the most difficult environments on the entire planet to study directly and continuously. Extreme cold, crushing pressure, complete darkness, and sheer remoteness combine to create a research environment almost as challenging as a deep space exploration in terms of raw accessibility and cost. Every confirmed fact about this species exists specifically because a piece of evidence managed to somehow escape that extreme environment, whether through an accidental fishing catch, a whale's stomach, or a chance encounter with a research submersible exploring shallower water than usual. The vast majority of this animal's actual life continues unfolding in a place scientific instruments have barely begun to reach, let alone properly study in any comprehensive, ongoing way. Somewhere in the freezing depths surrounding Antarctica, right now a full-grown colossal squid is likely moving through complete darkness, its massive eyes scanning for the faint shimmer of bioluminescent light that might signal an approaching sperm whale. No camera has ever recorded that moment. No scientist has ever directly witnessed it happen. That single fact captures everything remarkable about this species. In an age when satellites can track individual animals across entire oceans, when cameras have documented nearly every major creature on the planet in direct, exhaustive detail, the colossal squid remains one of the last genuine mysteries left in ocean science, an animal whose adult life continues almost entirely beyond the reach of direct human observation. Everything scientists currently understand about this species has been built from fragments, scars, and rare accidental encounters spread out across an entire century of research. Two torn arms in 1925, scattered beaks recovered from whale stomachs across decades of study, a single combative complete specimen in 2007, a brief unplanned juvenile sighting in 2025, exactly 100 years after the species was first formally named. Each of these individual discoveries added a genuine, meaningful piece to an ongoing puzzle that remains, even now, far from complete. Scientists can confidently describe this animal's weight, its eye size, its unique rotating hooks, and its remarkable ammonium-based buoyancy system. Yet they still cannot confirm exactly how it hunts, how it finds a mate, or what a normal day actually looks like for a fully grown adult living a mile beneath the ocean's surface. That gap between detailed anatomical knowledge and almost complete behavioral mystery makes the colossal squid a genuinely unique case within modern biology. Few, if any, other animals of this size and scientific significance remain this purely understood in terms of basic, everyday behavior, despite being so thoroughly documented anatomically through decades of careful specimen analysis. The 2025 juvenile sighting offered a genuine reason for optimism, though. It proved that continued exploration, even unplanned and accidental, can still produce meaningful breakthroughs for this species, even after a full century of near total silence. Every research vessel that ventures into these remote southern waters carries at least a small chance of encountering something no scientist has ever documented before. Somewhere out there, an adult colossal squid remains completely unfilmed. Its true hunting behavior, its mating rituals, and the full details of its daily life still existing entirely as scientific speculation rather than confirmed fact. Finding that animal, capturing genuine footage of a full grown adult moving freely through its natural habitat, would represent one of the most significant wildlife discoveries in the entire history of marine biology. Until that day arrives, the colossal squid remains exactly what it has been for the past century, an animal defined as much by what remains unknown about it as by what has actually been confirmed. A creature heavier than a piano, armed with rotating hooks and eyes the size of dinner plates, living out its entire adult life in a place so remote, so dark, and so difficult to reach that it continues to guard its own greatest secrets, waiting somewhere in the freezing dark for the day a camera finally catches it in the act of simply being itself.